Welcome to my channel. For more videos, please remember to like and subscribe. The alien queen thought she was untouchable, until a human put her in her place. The throne room of Lutharion's sky palace shimmered like the inside of a gemstone, its walls alive with drifting constellations projected from the palace's AI core. Vaelira sat on her levitating throne, one long leg crossed over the other, her golden eyes surveying the chamber with casual boredom. Her crown, a coil of silver filaments, pulsed faintly with the neural feed of the Empire. Every fleet movement, every planetary transmission, every whisper of rebellion hummed in her mind. She was the galaxy's untouchable queen, and she wore that untouchability like an elegant cloak, at least until the human was dragged in. The soldiers shoved him forward, and he stumbled, catching himself on the sleek black floor that reflected his face and hers. He straightened with a grin that made several of the alien guards twitch in offense. He was tall for a human, his hair a careless mess that suggested he'd slept through both the arrest and the shuttle ride here. Instead of trembling, whistling low. "Nice place," he said, his voice echoing. "Bit shiny. Do you polish this floor every day? Or is it just naturally slippery for dramatic entrances?" The murmur that followed was sharp, like the flick of a blade. Vaelira arched an eyebrow. Few beings dared speak to her like that. Fewer survived the minute after. "You are Jace Kalen," she said, her voice smooth and cool as the void. "You defied my commander's orders in battle." "Right," he said, tilting his head. "In my defense, his plan was dumb, like suicidally dumb. We were supposed to charge a shielded gunship with enthusiasm? I had other ideas." A ripple of quiet laughter ran through the line of human soldiers stationed at the edges of the throne room. Even one of Vaelira's own officers, a tall, hawk-nosed Lutharian, coughed suspiciously into his fist. Vaelira's ears twitched, a subtle, involuntary motion that betrayed irritation. She leaned forward, her hair flowing like black silk down the side of her face. "You admit your defiance?" "Oh, absolutely," Jace said. "If you're going to yell at me, I prefer we're all honest about it." His casual shrug was a spark in the silence. Vaelira's fingers twitched against the arm of her throne. It had been decades since anyone had spoken to her this way, and a part of her, the part that had survived 1,000 assassination attempts and crushed revolts without flinching, wanted to blast him into dust. But another part of her, small and treacherous, found the insolence oddly entertaining. "Do you understand," she said, voice dipping into a warning purr, "that I could have you executed before this chamber takes its next breath?" "Sure," Jace said, unbothered, "but then you'd never get to hear my excellent plan for not getting your flagship blown up next week." The room stilled. Even the projections of drifting stars seemed to pause. Vaelira tilted her head, studying him. "You presume to offer counsel to your queen?" "Not my queen," he said, with a smile that showed just a flash of teeth. "But yeah, I might know a thing or two about those rebel drones that keep chewing through your patrols, unless you want to keep losing ships in hilariously preventable ways." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Just a small one, a short exhale through her nose, but in the throne room of Vaelira the Untouchable, it was a seismic event. The counselors shifted uncomfortably. The human soldiers exchanged glances that were dangerously close to smug. "You are either fearless," Vaelira said softly, "or a fool." "Can't I be both?" he asked. "Multitasking is a human specialty." She rose from her throne in a single fluid motion. Her robes of dark starlight swirled, catching the glimmer of the holographic constellations. Every step toward him was soundless, predatory, and calculated. Jace, infuriatingly, remained relaxed, as though she were approaching to offer him a drink instead of judgment. "You will be confined to the palace until I decide your fate," she said. "Perhaps the silence of the dungeons will teach you humility." "Dungeons, huh?" he said. "Do they have room service?" Her guards seized his arms. He didn't resist, just grinned up at her as they dragged him toward the obsidian doors. "By the way," he called over his shoulder, "if you angle your patrols 3 degrees counterspin along the edge of the nebula, you'll cut drone attacks by half. You're welcome." The doors slammed shut behind him, leaving the queen in a silence that felt heavier than before. Her counselors began murmuring again, some calling for immediate execution, others warning of the propaganda risk. Vaelira didn't hear them. She was staring at the reflection of herself on the polished floor, and she was frowning, confused, unsettled and just a little amused. That night, she could not sleep. The palace hummed softly, its engines and environmental systems whispering through the metal bones of the Sky Palace. She wandered the upper observatories alone, a habit from her early reign, when she used to watch the stars and remind herself why she ruled. But now, every time she tried to focus on the sweeping arm of the galaxy or the winking lights of distant battles, she heard that insolent human voice. "Not my queen." Her ears twitched again. She realized to her own horror that she was almost looking forward to seeing him again. The dungeons of the Sky Palace were a strange mixture of ancient and absurd. Rows of transparent stasis cells floated above a floor of shifting light, each humming softly like a giant electronic purr. Jace sat cross-legged in one of them, humming to himself and tapping a rhythm on the force field with a spoon he had somehow acquired from the dinner tray. He had already named the two guards outside his cell, Lefty and also Lefty, since their mirrored armor made it impossible to tell them apart, and was halfway through explaining the rules of a game he'd invented called Force Field Pong when the corridor lights dimmed. The guards stiffened as a shadowy figure glided into view. Vaelira's cloak flowed behind her like a spill of liquid night, but she had traded her crown for a hood. Even cloaked and hooded, the long taper of her ears betrayed her identity. She approached silently, stopping just outside the glow of Jace's stasis field. "You must be really bored to visit me at this hour," Jace said, grinning. "Or did my petition for a bigger spoon finally go through?" "You speak as though you have the right to petition your queen," Vaelira said, her voice a soft echo in the dungeon. "Well, technically, I didn't say please, so it's more of a casual suggestion." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "So what brings you to the land of humming boxes and questionable cuisine?" Her golden eyes narrowed. She had come intending to intimidate him, to remind herself that she was still the untouchable queen. Instead, she felt that treacherous tickle in her chest again, the one that might turn into laughter if she wasn't careful. "I came," she said slowly, "to understand why you are still alive." "Oh, that's easy," Jace said. "Your execution paperwork probably has a lot of red tape. Or maybe you're just curious." "Curious?" Her ears twitched. "About you?" "Well, yeah," he said. "You could have vaporized me in your shiny throne room, but here I am, alive and spoon-equipped. That tells me you either like what I have to say, or you're hoping I'll go insane in a glowing box." He gestured at the walls. "Spoiler alert, not happening. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 siblings. This is basically a luxury suite." Vaelira's lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile before she caught herself. She had spent decades mastering her composure, but this human shredded it with casual words and crooked smiles. "You claim to know how to protect my fleets," she said. "You have one chance to explain yourself." "Gladly." He tapped the field twice with his spoon. "Your drones are smart but predictable. They expect you to do the same patrols every cycle. Humans call it forming a habit, very bad in war. You need to mix it up, spin them around the nebula, randomize their paths, and maybe don't broadcast your command frequencies on channels labeled Royal Fleet. Not subtle." She blinked at him. "You are suggesting that my empire is sloppy." "Well," he said, "I was going to say comfortably predictable, but yeah, that works too." The corridor filled with a silence so thick that even the stasis cells seemed to hesitate in their humming. Vaelira realized she was standing with her arms crossed, not in regal anger, but in something dangerously close to casual conversation. She straightened immediately. "You will be released," she said abruptly. "Temporarily. I want to see if your methods are useful." Jace grinned. "You're letting me out? I was about to start singing, and trust me, your guards would have begged for my release." She gave a sharp gesture, and the stasis field flickered out. The guards shifted uneasily as Jace stepped out, stretching like a man leaving a long nap. "Do I get my spoon back?" he asked. One of the guards hesitated before handing it to him. "Excellent. Always good to be armed." As they walked the long, glowing corridors of the palace, Jace peppered her with questions. "So, do all your hallways float like this? Do you ever get lost? And why do your elevators sing? I swear the one I came in played opera." He mimicked the sound, and she almost stumbled, caught between annoyance and a laugh she refused to let out. They reached the docking bay, where her personal cruiser waited like a dagger of black glass. He whistled low. Not bad, but no cup holders, huh? It is a warship, not a human minivan, she said, though his words lodged in her mind. Jace climbed aboard with casual confidence, as if strolling into someone's living room. Her crew watched him like he was a live plasma grenade, but he seemed oblivious. Within minutes, he was leaning over the tactical console, pointing at fleet routes and mumbling about bad traffic patterns in space. "You're going to love this," he said, tapping in a series of adjustments with the smooth competence of someone who'd studied chaos more than protocol. "This will make your enemies miserable. And if it doesn't work, hey, you can throw me back in the singing box." Vaelira folded her arms, watching him with an expression that shifted from suspicion to reluctant intrigue. He was reckless, infuriating, and completely unlike anyone she had ever met in her long, untouchable reign. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt a spark of something beyond the endless cycle of power and fear. The fractured moon of Braxis hung in the void like a broken lantern, jagged edges catching the starlight. Vaelira's cruiser glided toward it, silent and sleek, its hull reflecting shards of the shattered world. Jace lounged in the co-pilot's chair, one boot propped on the console despite her repeated threats to eject him into space. "So," he said, crunching on something suspiciously loud, "do all your moons come pre-cracked, or is this a special feature?" Her golden eyes flicked toward him. Braxis was the site of a civil war. Half the moon was vaporized by a rogue fusion cannon. "Ah," he said, holding up a piece of his ration bar. "So, crunchy on the outside, tragic on the inside. Got it." She ignored him, focusing on the tactical display as they approached the rebel mining colony clinging to the largest shard. She had brought her elite guards and a squadron of interceptors, intending to crush the rebellion in a swift demonstration of power. Jace, of course, had insisted on coming along, claiming he had a nose for trouble. The docking bay of the mining station was a rusted labyrinth, a far cry from the pristine elegance of the Sky Palace. When the ramp descended, the smell of scorched metal and ozone drifted in. Jace coughed dramatically. "Wow, I see your rebels are going for the we live in a burnt toaster aesthetic." One of her guards made a strangled noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. Vaelira shot him a look that promised consequences later. Inside, the station was dim and buzzing with old machinery. Rebel miners, grimy, sharp-eyed, and heavily armed, watched them from catwalks and shadows. Vaelira walked with the unflinching confidence of a queen who had never needed to look over her shoulder. Jace followed, somehow whistling a jaunty earth tune that echoed off the metal walls. "Careful," he said softly as they passed a tangle of pipes. "These folks are jumpy, probably never seen royalty before, or anyone with ears that aerodynamic." Her ears twitched. "You are fortunate, I find that almost amusing." Their first confrontation came fast. A rebel leader stepped out of the shadows, his rifle raised. "You shouldn't have come here, Queen," he said, voice rough with defiance. Vaelira didn't flinch. "You will surrender this facility and swear fealty to the Empire, or you will not leave this moon alive." The rebel laughed. "You're far from your throne. You bleed the same as the rest of us." Jace cleared his throat. "Counterpoint," he said, pointing up. "She brought like 20 stealth drones that are currently aimed at your forehead. Well, mostly your forehead. Maybe your shoulder, if the targeting AI's in a mood." The rebel hesitated. Then a klaxon screamed through the station, followed by the metallic shriek of tearing hull. Vaelira snapped her gaze to the ceiling. "Drones," Jace muttered, "and not ours." The corridor erupted into chaos as rogue combat drones, spider-like machines bristling with plasma cannons, swarmed from the ventilation shafts. Miners ducked, guards shouted, and Vaelira ignited a plasma blade with a snap hiss that bathed the corridor in blue light. "Stay behind me," she ordered. Jace drew a blaster with a shrug. "I'll just stand here and look pretty while dodging death lasers." The fight spilled through the twisting corridors. Vaelira moved with lethal grace, cutting down drones in arcs of light, her cloak whipping behind her. Sparks rained as Jace fired at exposed joints, muttering sarcastic commentary with every shot. "Great, more of them?" he said, diving behind a console as plasma fire scorched the air. "Do they come with a warranty, or do we just return them to the nearest evil factory?" At one point, an anti-gravity field malfunctioned, sending them floating mid-battle. Jace spun upside down, still firing. This is either the worst firefight of my life or the most fun I've had in months. Vaelira caught his arm, stabilizing him long enough to land a finishing strike on the last drone. The echo of battle faded, leaving only the hiss of leaking pipes and the distant groan of metal. Around them, the miners stared in stunned silence. The rebel leader slowly lowered his rifle. "Saved us," in his voice. "Technically," Jace said, hanging upside down from a pipe, "she saved you. I just added style points." The rebellion's fire sputtered under the weight of that unexpected rescue. Within the hour, the miners were kneeling, swearing loyalty, and offering the station's resources to the Empire. Vaelira accepted with her usual regal poise, but inside, something unfamiliar stirred. It wasn't just victory. It was the echo of laughter and the memory of a human tumbling weightless through a firefight like he'd been born for chaos. When they returned to the cruiser, Jace slumped into the co-pilot's chair, hair singed and face smudged with soot. "So," he said, "do I get a medal or just an upgraded spoon?" Vaelira looked at him for a long moment. "You will live to see another mission," she said finally. "See progress," he said, grinning. "At this rate, you might even start liking me." Her ears twitched, and she turned away before he could see the corner of her mouth betray her. The Sky Palace drifted in its slow orbit above Lutharion, bathed in the blue shimmer of the planet's storms. In the throne room, Vaelira sat motionless, staring at the holographic reports floating before her. Rebellion chatter was rising across 3 sectors, and the miners of Braxis had barely sworn loyalty before word spread that the untouchable queen had relied on a human to save her life. Her fingers tightened on the throne's armrest. Even the hum of the neural crown felt heavier tonight. Jace strolled in without waiting for permission, flanked by 2 guards who looked exhausted from trying to keep up with him. "Your palace is a maze," he said. "I turned left at a singing elevator and ended up in a room full of floating fish. Are those pets or appetizers?" Vaelira's ears flicked. "You are supposed to wait for an escort to bring you to the throne room." "I did," he said, "but your escort kept sighing dramatically. I think he needed a break from my winning personality." She exhaled slowly through her nose. He was becoming more comfortable here. Maybe too comfortable. Yet the edge of tension in her chest eased a little as he leaned casually against a console, squinting at the floating reports. "Looks like bad news," he said. "I can tell because everything's red and blinking like a nightclub." 3 fleets have reported sabotage," she said. "Rebel propaganda spreads faster than plasma fire. They believe I am vulnerable." "Well," Jace said, "you did almost get turned into space confetti by drones last week, and now the whole galaxy knows a human saved your long-eared majesty." She glared at him. He raised his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just saying, rumors are kind of inevitable. But hey, silver lining, people might start thinking you're relatable." "I do not want to be relatable," she said. "You say that," he said, "but then you started laughing at my jokes. That's step 1. She rose from the throne and paced to the observation window. Lightning flickered across the planet below, illuminating her reflection. Behind her, Jace wandered the room, poking at harmless holograms until the AI scolded him in 3 languages. "You have a problem," he said finally, turning serious. "Not the fleets, not the rebels. Well, okay, also the rebels, but mostly perception. Everyone's sniffing for weakness. You need a win. A big, dramatic, bow before the queen, or get out of the galaxy kind of win." "I will not start a war to soothe my pride," she said, though the thought gnawed at her. "Good," he said, "because starting wars for pride is how humans invented reality TV." A sudden tremor rolled through the floor. The lights flickered, and a piercing alarm shrieked. Vaelira snapped her gaze to the ceiling as the AI announced, "Unauthorized intrusion in the royal atrium." Jace was already running toward the door. "I swear every time I'm here, something explodes or tries to kill you. I'm starting to take it personal." They sprinted through the curving corridors to the atrium, a garden of hovering platforms and bioengineered trees that shimmered with silver leaves. An assassin in a stealth suit crouched atop one of the platforms, plasma rifle aimed at the queen. Jace didn't think. He shoved Vaelira down behind a hovering planter just as a bolt of plasma scorched the air where she'd been standing. Guards poured in, but the assassin leapt with inhuman agility, vanishing into the upper branches of the silver trees. "Great," Jace muttered, drawing his blaster. "We've got a ninja in space. Classic. The assassin moved like a shadow through the branches, firing in bursts. One shot clipped a hovering platform, sending it spinning into the atrium pool with a splash. Jace climbed the platforms with reckless speed, ducking blasts and yelling, "A little help here, Your Majesty?" Vaelira leapt gracefully after him, plasma blade igniting with a sharp hum. Together, they chased the intruder through the atrium, Jace providing chaotic cover fire while muttering complaints about parkour assassins and hazard pay. When the assassin finally misjudged a leap, Jace tackled him midair. They crashed onto a hovering platform, and the stealth suit fizzled, revealing a scarred Lutharian rebel. Guards swarmed in and restrained the attacker as Vaelira approached, her blade still glowing. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The assassin spat. "The galaxy will see what you are, a queen hiding behind a human fool." Jace wiped a smear of blood from his lip. "Rude. Also, you're welcome for the free tackle." Vaelira dismissed the guards to the brig and turned to Jace. Her chest still heaved from the adrenaline, and she realized he was looking at her differently now, less like a soldier, more like someone quietly keeping her alive despite herself. "You could have been killed," she said. "Yeah," he said, wincing as he touched his shoulder. "But then who would teach your guards the ancient art of—" For a heartbeat, the echo of her laugh mingled with the fading alarm. It was absurd, dangerous, and treacherous for a queen to laugh in the aftermath of an assassination attempt, but she couldn't help it. Jace had that effect on her, and it was starting to feel less like a weakness and more like a spark of something she couldn't name. The throne room of the Sky Palace trembled with the weight of war. Holographic displays rippled around Vaelira as fleets converged on Lutharian. The rebel coalition had united, and the final challenge to her reign glimmered in the void beyond the palace windows. Her counselors whispered panic, but she sat still, one hand on the armrest, the other brushing the neural threads of her crown. Jace strolled in like he owned the place, chewing on what looked like a ration bar and leaving crumbs on the polished floor. "Well," he said, looking at the holograms, "I see the galaxy RSVP'd to your party. How many guests are bringing explosives?" 73 ships, she said, eyes fixed on the projection. "They have stolen codes. They will breach the palace if we do not intercept them." "Good news," he said, tossing the empty wrapper toward a hovering waste drone. "I happen to specialize in last-minute chaos management." The counselors glared at him. Vaelira's golden eyes stayed on the stars. "I cannot appear weak," she said quietly. "You're not weak," he said. "You're just slightly outnumbered, outgunned, and about to be internet famous if this goes badly. But don't worry, we're gonna win. And I have a plan that's only half insane." Moments later, they were aboard the flagship. The fleet formed up as rebel ships approached in a swarm of jagged steel and stolen tech. Vaelira sat in the command chair, calm but no longer cold. Jace paced behind her, muttering about creative maneuvers and inspired nonsense. The first volley of plasma lit the void. The Sky Palace shook as shields absorbed the impact. Vaelira gave the order to counterattack, her voice ringing through the neural network that linked every ship. She felt the fleet move as one. But now, woven through her commands, was Jace's improvisation. Ships twisted in unexpected arcs, feints and loops that turned the battle into a dance of chaos. On the rebel flagship, confusion rippled. Their stolen codes failed to predict the fleet's movements. Interceptors darted along unpredictable vectors, slipping behind the enemy's heavier ships. Drones they had relied on for easy kills were ambushed by stealth units in a random but devastating pattern. "Ha!" Jace shouted, leaning over the tactical console. "See? I told you randomness is your friend. Chaos is basically my brand." Vaelira allowed herself the smallest of smiles. But the battle wasn't over. The rebel flagship broke through the defensive line, aiming straight for the palace. "We end this now," she said, rising. "Prepare for boarding." They met the rebel leaders in the shattered atrium of the palace. Smoke curled from cracked platforms, and the silver-leaved trees had lost their glow. Plasma fire traded across the chamber as the rebels pushed forward. Vaelira ignited her blade and moved like a living storm. Jace followed with cover fire, quipping between shots. "I'm starting to think your interior decorator's gonna hate us after this." A rebel commander lunged for Vaelira, and Jace intercepted him with a flying tackle that sent them both sliding across a hovering platform. He fired point blank, then rolled to his feet, panting. "Still alive," he said, half to himself. 10 out of 10. Would tackle again. One by one, the rebels fell or surrendered. When the last plasma rifle clattered to the floor, the throne room was silent except for the crackle of damaged consoles. Vaelira stood tall, blade dimming, and looked at the kneeling survivors. "Your rebellion is over," she said. "But your lives are spared. You will rebuild what you sought to destroy, and you will remember why." The words carried more than authority now. There was a weight of change in her voice, a queen who had laughed, bled, and risked more than her pride. The survivors nodded, subdued. Hours later, the palace floated in calm orbit once more. The fleets returned to formation. In the observation deck, Vaelira and Jace stood side by side, watching the stars. "You know," he said, leaning on the railing, "for someone who started out untouchable, you've gotten kinda human." She glanced at him, ears twitching. "And for someone who started out insufferable, you have become tolerable." "I'll take it," he said, grinning. "So what now? Back to ruling the galaxy with a shiny iron fist?" She looked out at the stars, the endless swirl of her empire. "No," she said softly, "back to ruling it differently." Jace smirked. "With a sidekick?" "With an advisor," she corrected. "First advisor in insolence." He gave an exaggerated bow. "Finally a title worthy of me." They stood in companion. Stars drifted past, the galaxy theirs again, but changed. She was no longer untouchable. She was something rarer, a queen who had faced chaos, found laughter in the void, and chosen to rule not just with power, but with the fragile, infuriating spark of humanity she'd discovered in the most unlikely place. And for the first time in her long reign, Vaelira felt truly alive. The end